I've always enjoyed walking as a form of exercise from the time I was in high school, and I would put on my Walkman. I think I had a Panasonic version, and put my cassette tapes in and walk around the neighborhood. It was a fun form of exercise. And so when our oldest child was born, I enjoyed taking him out either in my baby carrier or in the stroller to take walks through the neighborhood. And would talk to him as we'd go about. And as he got older and was walking, we would both take walks with him. And I remember, Don, you telling me this story that you would teach him we had to look both ways before we crossed the street. And you would put your hand on his head and you would have him side to side. We got to look before we cross the street. So I don't know how many times you did that. And one day you said, Harrison, what do we do before we cross the street? And he put his hand on his head and he turned his head side to side. It still makes me chuckle when I think about it. And I remember walking when our second child was in the stroller, and Harrison's 4 years older, but and I met a neighbor because her father lived with them, and he had some form of dementia, and he would walk out to get the mail every day, and we'd have a conversation with him, and I got to meet his daughter, the woman that lived in the house, and later her daughters, who were kind of young teens at that time, came to be babysitters for our children. So walking is good for us in more ways than one.
Well, hello, this is Don.
And this is Gina with Focused Healthy Family.
And today we have podcast number 169. And guess what? We are talking about the F word. But before we get started, let's start out with a simple tip from we go with Caregiver 101, 101 ways to keep caregiving from making you crazy. And this is tip number 61, and it's called Get Moving. Consistent repetitive motion such as walking, swimming, biking, or even chewing gum have been known to induce feelings of calm and tranquility.
And Don, I've got some jokes for you.
Okay.
Although this is going to give away what the F word is.
Okay.
What did the acorn say when it fell?
I don't know. What did the acorn say?
I'm just going to roll with it. Why did the bicycle fall down?
I don't know. What happened to the bicycle?
Because it was too tired. One more.
Okay.
What do you get when you drop a pumpkin?
A big mess, probably, but what is it?
A squash. Boom, boom.
Ba-dum-tee.
So today we are talking about the F word. And don't worry, this is still rated G. What do you think of when you hear that? So the reason I say that is working with older adults. Uh, a common reason that I wind up seeing people for therapy is they've had a fall. And they often hate that word. They hate being asked, how many times have I fall? They hate thinking about it. And so they're like, don't even say it. So I sometimes say, the F word. We got to talk about the F word because unfortunately, as we age, it is incredibly common to fall. And there's so many factors involved that can contribute to falls.
Well, I would imagine one of the reasons they probably don't like to talk about it because as you get older, you think you should be able to get up from a fall and be able to handle it. And as you get older, you don't always handle it. It can be very stressful for you, but they don't want to talk about it. They think they should be able to stand up on it. So,
I have a funny fall story. I was at an event. It was a social dance outing when we were still homeschooling. And the rugs were just these really thick plush rugs. And I don't know if I was squatting down or something, and I went to get up and I moved forward, but my feet didn't, and I fell hard back on my butt. And I was embarrassed more than anything. And I just wanted to scramble to get up, right?
mhm.
So these things happen to us over the years. Remember when we were ice skating, Don,
Oh
and
yeah.
you fell
Oh
and your knee swelled up? So ice skating turned into enjoying wings at the nearby restaurant.
yes,
And
yes.
so we fall, we get small hurts, and we just move on. Well, If we're older, if our bones are weaker, osteoporosis, other factors involved, depending on the strength of our muscles, it can cause a fracture. And sometimes we don't know it. Um, and there are many things, though, that contribute to falls. And I found this wonderful article. We'll have to quote it in the notes. But things that can contribute to falls. So, Dom, what things do you think can contribute to falls as we age?
Well, it talks about in the
Oh,
article
oh,
about,
you read it already.
well, I went over it anyway, but it was just reading, that as we get older, our bones change, and we falling can be a little easier because we don't have the muscle strength and the things that would keep us up, I guess.
Also, our eyesight. There are many
Oh,
things that, as we get older, sometimes our peripheral vision diminishes. So that's the ability to see out to the side. Things like cataracts, glaucoma, macular degeneration, pretty common things. It can be other things affecting eyesight. If someone doesn't see well out of one eye, all these things affect our ability to function. Things like diabetes that can contribute to decreased sensation in our feet. Problems with our thyroid, blood vessels can affect that. Having to go to the bathroom quickly, waking up in the middle of the night and having to dart into the bathroom. Well, if you get a little dizzy when you first get up, some people have trouble with their blood pressure dropping, and you're rushing to go to the bathroom as we get older. If we have more urge incontinence or just issues with trying to get there on time, that contributes to it. Um, Mild cognitive impairment or types of dementia increase risks of falling. Age related muscle mass, known as sarcopenia. And we'll talk more about this, but as we age, um, I went to a course years ago and it talked about after 40, we start to lose muscle mass. This other article talks about even between the ages of 30 and 35
yeah.
is our maximum, when we've built up the most muscle mass. And so over time, we're losing that muscle mass. And a lot of times we'll do walking and other aerobic exercise. We forget about strength training, which we'll get into. Foot problems. That can be a big thing. Your foot's uncomfortable depending on the types of shoes you're wearing, slippers, walking around in sock feet. All these things can contribute to falling. And medications. We need to look at the side effects. Many older adults can be on multiple medications. And
Well, one thing they didn't talk about in there that I think a lot about too is and it's nutrition.
mm,
As we've as the United States gotten older, and we're not taking as good care of what we're taking in and changing our internal parts. I think it could also weaken us as far as our immune system and our muscles, all that.
yeah, I mean, that affects kind of all these different factors. If we're not hydrated, that can cause low blood pressure, which can cause us to get dizzy and fall. People think, it's better to have lower blood pressure, but if it's too low, it can cause that dizziness, cause you to pass out. But yeah, if you're not getting proper nutrition, you're not able to maintain your strength. Your muscles need protein to build and grow. People who are vegetarian really need to think about what protein sources are they getting and the amount of protein that we need to maintain that. Yeah, having a calcium, vitamin D. Um, is it vitamin D is best absorbed along with vitamin K? There's some different nutritional factors that are involved. So yeah, all that kind of ties together um, in in affecting. And then the other thing is environmental factors, which I think we've talked
No,
about
yeah.
before. Throw rugs, biggest trip hazard ever, whether you're using a cane or walker or not. The edge of them, yes, if you're going to have rugs, they should be secured to the floor with non-skid surface, but tassels on the end of rugs, those things can contribute to falls. Rugs that slide, hardwood. We have a runner in our house, and it's really not the best. We probably should just get rid of it now I think about it. But the cats go running across it and it slips when they run and slides. We have some at the door that have the non skid. But these, if someone's at higher risk of falls, if they're struggle picking up their feet, they're pushing a walker, it's really best to get rid of those throw rugs. But other
Well,
things on the floor, if you're have young children and you're caring for an older person, toys and things on the floor that can get in the way, or that an older person might not see if their vision is impaired.
and you also, we can step outside to steps. We got to think about that as far as that's probably not the biggest fall thing, but it's there.
Yeah, and some people, um, they might have a step down in their house. There's some houses, I don't know what time period, but you step down into the living room or the laundry room or just like that one step. And often there's no rail. If you have multiple steps entering your house, you might have a railing, but those changes in the floor within the home are a big factor. And again, that vision, if someone's impaired with vision, they can't always see that their depth perception. Yeah.
That also just kind of thought is you talk about coloration too. When with envision, having vision problems, you start changing your ability to see certain colors. Is that um, just
Well, the contrast,
contrast?
like
Yeah.
something we do as a um, compensatory strategy is putting like a bright red or hot pink tape on the edges of stairs or where you need to see that contrast to help people. Um, with that. So it's the depth perception that's often the issue of telling. We've all walked down the stairs and thought we were on the last step and kind of like
Yeah.
stumbled as we stepped down. And most of the time, we can keep our balance. So the younger we are, it's like young kids, they fall all the time and they bounce right back up, right?
Yeah.
They've got more flexibility in their joints and their bones are stronger and they have further the distance they fall is much shorter when they're young and they're little. Um, I remember our youngest, or no, our middle child, we'd go roller skating and she was pretty good at it. But then when she got taller and those legs were longer, it was like, whoa, wait a minute, this is harder to do now that my legs have gotten longer.
Well, I find going down the steps, I have to hold on to the handle that, and I don't want to give that up. I like that's a little bit of a stability for me to
Yeah, and
go
there's,
down the steps.
I do it too. And we both have issues with our knees, and that's a common thing. Your knee starts to give out. But like our carpet on our stairs is kind of old. Our youngest has slid down it multiple times because she likes to fly up and down the stairs. Worn carpet can affect that. I remember my grandfather, he was clever. He was, just had good common sense and ideas. And for their concrete steps outside, he mixed sand, I think, in with the paint. And so
Mhm.
it gave it that rougher surface
Okay.
to make it safer. They make special things for that, but something simple is just putting
Throwing some sand
sand in the
in.
paint can serve that purpose. So you don't have to always spend a lot of money or buy the fancy gadgets and things. Like I said, I love to use tape for people who can't locate things, and it's a good visual cue, especially related to this. So
One other thought in this is in the shower. Isn't that a fairly large fall factor?
yeah, frequently, I work with people who are going through rehab and they if you've had a loved one or you've been in rehab, you leave the hospital and you go to this rehab center and they tell you don't get up by yourself, but there's not that many nursing staff around, and it's but don't get up by yourself and you're going to get in trouble if you don't use your call bell. Well, why? Because a fall can really set you back. Maybe you're recovering from some kind of fracture. Um, Older people can fall and hit their head and have a brain bleed and different factors and just bruising, even if you don't break something, the bruising and getting sore. So this is going to slow down your recovery. Um, and so when people get stronger and they're better and you're like, okay, you can walk to the bathroom yourself, I send people home. Most of the time, I'm like, have someone there when you first get a shower.
Mm.
It's wet, which makes it slick, even if you have a good non skid surface. It's really helpful for most people to have a shower seat because if you're going to wash your feet, then all of a sudden you're standing on one leg, right? Having that grab bars obviously are important. But the other thing is people building up their endurance from an illness or injury. It's fatiguing to take a shower.
Mm.
And so, it takes a lot of energy. And so then getting out of the shower and having to dry off and put clothes on, all these things. And then, of course, falling in the bathroom, hitting your head, whether you have a porcelain tub or, tile floor. Yeah, it's just a real danger zone of usually things are close together. Um, so that and getting up to go to the bathroom at night or frequently at night, things like low night lights to have a little bit of light when you're getting up. And, I tell people in rehab facilities, they often will put a brief on someone or, a pull up to absorb urine, right? I don't like to call them diapers. They're adult briefs, depends. It's better to have some leak in there than to try to get up and trip and fall, right? So, those things, those products can be helpful as we age. Because, yeah, you run into the bathroom and then you wind up with an injury and then you're achy and if you don't fall but you strain a muscle or you have some kind of soreness, that also um, contributes to the risk of falling. So it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about. And like I said, people are like, oh, don't even say fall. They it's like it's a bad word. It's people talk about it all the time. I know my dad would fall a lot with Parkinson's. It's common between the coordination issues and balance and things. And he didn't typically get hurt. So he didn't think it was a big deal. Yet it's that one time you fall. It can really set people back, especially when you're already looking at, an illness like degenerative neurological disorder like Parkinson is, and he had dementia with that on top of it as well. It can make things even worse. So finding ways to improve the environment, to make things safer, to minimize those risks, and strength building. Um, so not just, we can walk, we can jog, we can walk on a treadmill, these are all aerobic exercise versus strength training. So, strength training, you're using resistance, you're using weights or something to build muscles. And, I've told people, get older people, and a 1 pound weight is enough, resistance for them. A bottle of water, a can of beans or whatever is usually about 1 pound. And that can add a little bit of resistance. When people are recovering, sometimes just the weight of our own arms, right, is heavy enough. And so doing some active motions, bands, therabands that provide resistance are things that come in different resistance levels. It's so easy to order things online now, pretty inexpensive to get. I know, Don, we picked up some weights for you at Five and Below, it didn't even $5 or less that we bought some little hand weights to use for resistance.
I found that I finally got I've always talked to people about building muscle and with ATP, which I never knew what it stood for, but I actually found it in this article because it talks about muscle using muscle to build your kind of rebuild yourself and it talks about the more you do that, it uses up the ATP, which causes you to increase more of it. And I found out that it's part of DNA, but it also is the fuel for our cells. It what gets our cells up and going.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of research that's gone into building muscle mass. I get patients that are in their 80s and 90s and like, old age, I can't get stronger. That's not true. Research has shown no matter how old we are, we can improve muscle mass, and there is a real science to it. The chemicals involved, and building up those muscle fibers to strengthen the muscles. And there was an article here talking all about it. I just wanted to back up a minute. Um, Getting enough sleep is also an important factor to minimize falls. And then it talks about alcohol consumption. Some elderly people may have a drink a day, or we might not realize there's a mild drinking problem going on. Um,
That's a stumble factor for anybody with alcohol, but when you get older, it gets even worse.
and you don't always think about that, but it can play a part there. We mentioned bones weakening. So, osteoporosis is a disease where the bones become brittle. They lose their density. Think about different types of wood. You've got oak and maple, and they're very dense, they're thick, right? And then you've got pine, which is a lighter weight wood. So, our bones, we want them dense and thick, but different things can contribute to osteoporosis where the bones are more brittle. And the more brittle they are, the easier they break. Some people have it to the extent that they fall, but the bone broke, causing them to fall. They can be that brittle that they can fracture even without a fall. So paying attention to these things, it's where going to the doctor, having vision checked, hearing checked, um, knowing what's going on and making what can you do to improve those things to minimize that fall.
They mentioned in there about uh, working with balance.
Mm-hmm.
Any thought that maybe you can help a little bit in what can you do to adjust balance or get yourself in a better line there?
Right. So we can have decreased balance as we get older, right? And
Hmm.
so, you can be unsteady backwards often. It can be in different directions. If you have had even a minor stroke or something that causes weakness on one side, like I talked about, if your vision is impaired on one side, your sense of center is off, and all these things can contribute to impaired balance. So, the way we improve our balance is we do activities that challenge it. So, like if we stumble, we have writing reactions that help catch us to keep us from falling. And so when I work with people, that's why we'll put a gait belt on, the belt around the waist, and I'll be right there to hold them because we want to get them off their center of balance. We want them to utilize those reactions to help improve um, that balance. And so, more dynamic activities. Um, the other thing is thinking about strengthening muscles is we can't forget about our ankles. If we have weak ankles, that's going to
Mm.
be a big factor in our balance. So not just our bigger muscles in our upper legs. We think about our quads, our hamstrings, and those muscles, but and the flexibility in our ankles. Just a simple raising your toe up and down and doing it slowly and holding it. That can get diminished for different reasons. And yet, when we're walking, if we can't pick our toe up and bend our ankle enough, we're not clearing our foot off the ground. That's contributing to falling. With Parkinson's and the shuffling gait, the best way to work on that is to exaggerate that motion and, march to get people lifting their feet up. And it's just kind of a good strategy for anyone I noticed and their feet are not clearing the floor real well. Is okay, let's, think about really picking our feet up to improve that. And that's, working those muscles extra hard too. Um, but yeah, then there's inner ear issues. Dizziness is a common thing, and often the doctors say we don't know why. We don't know what's causing it. If it's a true inner ear vertigo problem, there's actually specific exercises. You find a physical therapist or a therapist who specializes in this, and it has to do with the little tiny bones in your ear and that they're off kilter. And so finding someone who can specialize in that, but it's not often. Sometimes that cause is not known.
Well, remember we had a lady on this been probably about a year
A
ago
physical
that
therapist
talked about the imbalance and it's not just about vertigo. It's a lot can be a lot deeper than that, and they don't realize it. And yeah, that's what she works on specifically on that.
we'll have to link to that
Yeah.
podcast because yeah, she kind of went into this in all detail. Um, and looking at the science of strength. So those, for those people who think, oh, my mom's 90 or, I'm 80, what's the point of doing exercise? So strength training, known as resistance training, is different from aerobic exercise. So, using weights, using resistance to build the muscle mass. Um, so, when you do resistance, and I'm quoting from this article that we'll put in the links, when you do resistance or strength training, very important chains of molecules that relay signals between cells are affected. These changes linger in the body for hours after exercise, building up cumulative positive effect. Even after a low intensity strength and walking program has substantial benefits. So, any amount, you don't have to do, lengthy exercise. If you're getting a little bit in, it's better than not at all. Um,
Well, it's now make it makes me. I always wondered when we were doing like when I did a cardio rehab, we would do weight training at one of the episodes, and one of them I never understood is that you just put the to the side and you just lift your legs up and down. But that's what you were just talking about is strengthening that the back muscle and the foot with
lift your
just
legs
doing.
up and down
I
by,
meant as far as just
show me, Don.
the back end of
Oh,
doing
your
up like
heels.
this, up and
Heels
down,
up.
heels up, yeah.
Yes, heels up and down. There's toes up and down, and there's heels up and
Well,
down.
and you do
Yes.
that too. We also did toes up and down and
Yes.
all that too. So that's all.
Yeah, there's so many muscles in the body. And, it's like when I work with people, a lot of times therapists, we'll do shoulder, we'll do biceps, we'll do triceps, but the wrist, we need to exercise our wrist muscles. Think about all the motions. Our hands turn over. This is called supination and pronation. Our wrists go up and down. They actually even go side to side a little bit. So there's so many different muscles that are involved. And someone who's using a walker or even a cane, they're putting a lot more pressure through that wrist and can
Mm.
cause strain. And so exercises to strengthen that. And again, taking a water bottle, something that's, easy to hold in your hand. A water bottle is even better than like a can because it's usually narrower
Flexible,
and
yeah.
flexible, to add a little weight. And when you're doing exercises, you want to isolate and not just move your arms all over, but like I literally will hold someone's forearm if you're watching this on video so that they're moving just their wrist up and down, to isolate that particular muscle, that we want to exercise. People often do lots of curls, right? They're just bringing their elbows, bringing their hands in. That's our strongest muscle, our biceps. And yes, it needs to be strong, but the opposite is the triceps. When women get older, we call it the flabby arm. And you use your triceps to help push up into standing and to support yourself and on the walker. And so we can have imbalance in our muscles where we're doing all these bicep curls and our biceps are strong, but the triceps are weak.
Well, and that's what you do. We do the back. We were doing the back hands with
And
weights.
a lot of people can't raise their shoulders up. So, what other ways can we exercise? You can also hold your arm out to the side and push back. But another great exercise, you sit forward on a chair with arms, and all you do is push through your arms to pick your bottom up off the chair. I'll do this with people who can't even get their bottom up at all, but they're using those muscles. They're pushing through the back of their arms. If you sit in a chair and just push through your arms, but don't even get up, you can feel that you're activating those muscles. You're building those muscle fibers up. And if you're able to lift your bottom off the chair, all the more. This is also good for core strengthening. Um, so that's a real, easy one. And it can be challenging, to isolate and strengthen these different muscles when people have injuries to their shoulder, between arthritis or rotator cuff tear or other things. They can't always get their arm up overhead like you talked about doing in class, but we can still exercise those muscles in a different position. So when I work with people, we can adapt. And so that's where getting therapy services, physical occupational therapy, to kind of help direct you in exercises. So there was this saying, I don't know who said it, where it came about, no pain, no gain. So um, we don't want pain when we exercise. So there's achiness, there's that tired muscle feeling. Okay, that's one thing. But sharp, shooting, stabbing, all of a sudden it's painful. Those are not good.
Mm.
If it's kind of stabbing or shooting, that can be pinching a nerve. We don't want those kind of pains when we're exercising. We also don't want to do it to the point where the next day, like, oh, I can hardly move. I've had people give them exercise programs and they'll do it in front of the TV and they just do it continuously, whether it's hand exercises or, and then they're sore from overdoing. So, all things to think about. Yes, you can strengthen your muscles no matter your age. There are balancing out the different muscle groups and not just focusing on, the big muscles or, remembering your ankles, remembering wrist strengthening. And the other big one is our neck. You talk about falls, I thinking about posture. Particularly with Parkinson's, you have this typical leaning and hunched position, and you see that in many other conditions as well. So we do, and the things that we do when we drive, we're forward. Our shoulders are forward, our head is forward. When we're on our phone, we're on our computer, we spend a lot of time in this position. And over time, you know, when you look at somebody from the side, their head should be over their shoulders, but most people have a slight head forward or a little bit of a curve, and over time, that's affecting, your balance as you're standing. Why falling is one of the reasons falling is common in Parkinson's, is postural. And my favorite stretch to do is you just pull your shoulders down and back. You feel your shoulder blades behind you, which are your scapulas, and you're pinching them together. And you're also holding your head up, not like looking up as much as back. Yeah, put your head down, Don. Yeah, look straight ahead and pull your head back. Yeah. So it's very subtle. And some people can't do very much, but I'll put my hand back there and I'll put a pillow, squeeze into the pillow, and you feel that across your chest and shoulders, your pectoral muscles, even your deltoids.
Isn't that one of the things they do when they put you up like against the wall too? I've had the chiropractor always did that, put you up
Yes,
against the wall.
because we are usually not standing straight. It contributes to neck pain, not only posture but spinal issues, neck issues. Yeah, trying to stand with your heels against and your head, which is really hard to do, and can be hard to keep your balance while doing that. Yeah, I learned a trick when I work in facilities with elevators. Is whenever I stand in the elevator to lean, stand up against the wall, not leaning, but my feet are back against it and my head is to kind of a cue to remind you to do that to compensate for all these ways in which we put extra strain and stress on our bodies. And again, weakness, imbalance of muscles, postural things, all are factors in our health. And that big F word, falling, which can lead down the path of, going to the hospital, and then you're not getting the nutrition necessarily that you need. And then you're stuck in bed. Um, I've heard from every 1 day you stay in bed, you need 3 days to recover.
Hmm.
Think about yourself. You have the flu, when you had COVID, whatever, and you just, you don't get up and hardly move for a day or so. Then you try to go out and walk again, right? You have to build your endurance back up. You've gotten weaker. So add different medical factors, diagnoses, and more age to that. It's can be even slower, which is a big reason um, going to rehab before going home from the hospital is the time to be up, to be moving around. Because in the hospital, they have to do tests. Therapy services might be ordered, but the therapist might come at a time where you've gone for a CAT scan or something. And then, they're not able to come back because they have a lot of people to see in the whole facility. And so you're not getting a lot of therapy services typically in the hospital setting. And so just that being in bed, a big thing, real weak people that we get, just trying to get them out of bed, sitting in the recliner, sitting up on the side of the bed. Because when we're laying, even if, people say, well, I sit up when I eat, I raise the head of my bed, the bed's doing all the work. Your muscles aren't having to work that much to hold yourself up. And as high as you can raise the back of a bed, you're still not fully upright. Um, but so thinking about all these different factors, reducing the risk of falls from environmental, medical conditions, sensation, numbness in our feet, um, the muscles, the strength in the muscles. I'm trying to kind of recap the things we've talked about, Don. Are there other things that you think about And we can share links to these because they're pretty in-depth
Yeah, I'm just going to put
articles
those up there. Plus,
about, it even goes into, oh, the one thing I did forget. One way to incorporate strength training is weighted vests. So they make vests with little weights in them so you can adjust the amount that you can wear even under your clothing so that no one knows you're wearing them. You can also buy cuff weights that you could put on your legs or your arms when you're walking, and then you're adding that additional resistance. So you can be walking and also doing a little strength training. When you walk, you can incorporate arm movements, and by adding that extra weight, that can be helpful. So there are other ways to kind of, and they talk about just adding it into your daily routine. There was a study done, and we'll share the link, where people who are trying to lose weight, where they did the strength training, because when you're losing weight, you can be losing muscle mass too. And just having that vest on during your day, doing your daily activities, is adding some resistive um, exercise, some strength training.
when they talk about that too, it's not like you have to do it really hard in resistance.
And you don't
Just
have to use 50 pounds.
yeah.
I watch guys at the gym who belong to the Y, and they do real heavy weights, excuse me, or they're doing them real fast. Slower is actually working the muscle fibers more.
Mm.
Um, you usually want to be able to do at least 8 repetitions, otherwise it's too heavy for you. And increasing, repetitions over time. Um, yeah, there's so many factors that go into that. So sometimes at a gym, you might have someone who's, has knowledge in exercise, science of some sort, but you do want to make sure they're
It's
telling
always
you to do something and it doesn't feel right, or, maybe getting, more detailed source. If you're having, I've told this to family members and things, their balance is a little off. You're feeling a little off, get your doctor to write you an order for physical therapy before you fall, because they can, assess you. And if they find weakness in balance issues, that's a justification, for therapy services. And even if they just get you set up on an exercise program, you want someone qualified and knowledgeable in what you're doing. I remember an aerobics in the 80s, and you would move your neck real fast and bop it back and forth. And we don't want to do that. We always want to move our necks slowly. Um,
when they talk about too, it's about the hard resistances, doing things like yoga, or I think they talk about Tai Chi, in fact, is slow movements that can, are, different things that aren't hard in their resistance, but they do
Yeah,
cause
because you can
resistance.
do just, holding and resisting your own arms, pushing against a wall, or just, even if you're not, you can do a wall push up. So you put your hands on the wall and you're leaning forward, but you don't even have to be moving. If you're pushing into that wall, you're getting that resistance through those muscles, you can get that strengthening. Yeah, and we didn't even talk about core strength. We're talking about arms and legs and things, but so our stomach muscles, our back muscles, we need strong muscles there. That has a big factor. And Tai Chi and yoga and those things are great for that, and you're working those muscles when you're, sit upright and tense, tense up those muscles of your back and your stomach, to activate those muscle fibers. Um, yeah, so there's so many different factors. Our body is so complex and so many different muscles involved. And we need to exercise our whole body, because if you're just focusing, on one area, like, doing leg lifts, but you're not addressing your ankles, it can have an effect on you. So think about exercising and that F word. Um, and what can you do? So that's our podcast for today. We hope you've enjoyed it. We'd love to hear from you, leaving comments, feedback, suggestion, other topics you'd like to hear. And please share this with other people. You can find out more about Don and I and the work that we can do to support you on your journey, caring for yourself, your aging loved ones, and your children, by going to our website at focusedhealthyfamily.com. Don and I do consulting with people caring for aging loved ones. Don's work as an EFT practitioner, tapping, releasing energy that can affect pain and our emotions and how we're handling things to reduce anxiety, which is important for us when whether we're dealing with just raising children, caring for aging loved ones, managing our own daily um, stress and anxieties. And so these are all things that are part of what we do again at focusedhealthyfamily.com. You can find us on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family. Instagram is Focused Healthy Family 1. Again, if you're listening to this on a podcast, you can also see the episodes on YouTube at Focused Healthy Family. We air these podcasts every Thursday. We have a variety of topics. If there's something you'd like to hear, reach out. Also, check previous episodes. We've interviewed a vast number of people covering topics from raising children and as well as caring for self-care and caring for aging loved ones. So over the past almost 3.5 years, we've been doing this. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.